Harry Fone is the grassroots campaign manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, and he joins me live on the line, actually via video link. Hey there, Harry.
Good evening, Cristo. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks. I'm about to tear my own hair out with the frustrations of paying an exorbitant amount of council tax to my local council, and to find that they're essentially turning a blind eye to Extinction Rebellion, turning up in my local park and deciding to set up camp while they decide to disrupt the whole of London. Am I right to be annoyed with my council for not perhaps practicing what they preach?
I think you very much are. I mean, I wish I could say that this comes as a surprise, but after 3 years working at the Taxpayers Alliance and uncovering this sort of thing, it sadly doesn't anymore. I mean, we've seen, between 1997 and 2017, council tax in England has increased by 57% in real terms. The average bandy council tax bill in England is over £1,800, and I think many people like yourself are questioning, what do we actually get for our money? And at a time when every penny counts, we've got to get maximum possible value. I think many people rightly feel that their councils simply aren't delivering on that, and they have every reason to be annoyed, and I don't blame them for that for 1 second.
Do you think that there is an ideological issue with certain councils that will turn a blind eye to certain initiatives, certain groups, certain breaking of the rules if the agenda matches the council? For instance, I have a predominantly Labour council in my borough, and at the moment, you will know, I'm sure you've heard about the fact that there are many initiatives being brought in closing roads, for instance, for cyclists, and a lot of residents are annoyed that there hasn't been any consultation for that. Again, local council turning a blind eye to another left-wing agenda with Extinction Rebellion. And I can't help but think that if this was an initiative to open more roads for car drivers, or if this was an initiative by a right-wing group that had set up a camp in the park, I can't imagine that the council would be suddenly turning a blind eye to it all.
I think it doesn't necessarily matter if the council is Labour or Conservative, but a lot of councils seem to have got themselves caught up in this, climate change campaigning that's going on at the moment. A number of them have set up energy companies, with the promise that all the energy will be green. And guess what? Surprise, surprise, these companies are going bust. You mentioned the road situation. I mean, what do we pay our council tax for if they're not going to keep the roads open? They've put these sort of large planters, I guess you describe them as roadblocks, effectively in many streets. I mean, how many potholes could have been filled for that? The bane of many of our lives. And rightly, we've seen residents complaining, coming out and actively protesting this. We've also seen Warwick, before COVID happened, were threatening to have a referendum to raise council tax by an extraordinary percentage in an effort to raise a climate change action fund. Now, thankfully, that didn't come to. I say thankfully, it was because of COVID. It didn't come to bear, and all the elections were postponed. But it was a small blessing of COVID, I guess. But they are, yes, you're right. They do seem to be prioritizing, these goals, these ethoses over what they should be focusing on, which is delivering the best frontline services possible, trying to keep council tax as low as possible to reduce the burden on taxpayers. Because let's forget, the thing about council taxes, it's not really based on your ability to pay. It's not like income tax or, to a certain extent, VAT. You have to pay this if you live in a home, basically. And okay, it slightly varies on the value of your house, but you could have been made redundant and you still got
But
to pay it.
I probably stand alone as being one of the only people that was in favour of the poll tax, I'm sorry to say. For me, that was, I think it was badly implemented, and perhaps that it was not particularly perfect around the edges. However, for me, every single over 18-year-old in the country needing to contribute to their local area as a result of them living in their local area, I have no problem with whatsoever. Why should someone who's got a house that's got 4 adults living there producing 4 times the waste of someone living next door who might live on their own, but they only pay 25% more council tax? That's completely unfair, outdated, and completely archaic. But unfortunately, again, I think because of the makeup of many local councils here in the UK, any change to the council tax situation that we've got, I just don't think would ever be contemplated because of the hangover of the poll tax.
Yeah, I think you're right, and you're also right to say that the system. I really do think needs drastic overhaul. Don't get me wrong. I think councils do have a difficult job. I mean, social care makes up a huge percentage of their outgoings, but and I think people should be charged for the services that they use, and if they consume more than they pay that. It's to me it's sort of simple economics, but. Unfortunately, we are in this situation where we have a tax burden that's at a 50-year high. We can't really raise taxes, and we'll probably see revenues go down. So it is just so critical that these councils stop splurging money. In my own council of Milton Keynes, they went many millions of pounds over budget on an office refurbishment. In fact, one of the things they did was put moss on the wall. Would you believe it? Again, as part of an eco drive. And it's deeply worrying, and when people are complaining about they're paying more council tax and they're seeing this reduction in frontline services, councils really need to think about what their priorities should be.
And do you think that there are just too many examples across the UK? Because I don't want us to get sort of caught into some of the Daily Mail trap of every single council being wasteful. But we do seem to get ridiculous. It's really easy as well to find examples across the whole of the UK of IT systems that were cost thousands that never ended up getting implemented. Ridiculous advertising campaigns like I've just described, spending 5 figures on an advert reminding us to say hello to each other. These ridiculous initiatives, painting 30 inches of double yellow lines, coming up with these planters that no one has asked for. I mean, how can we actually get councils, other than at the ballot box, where nothing seems to change actually, to start respecting that it's not their money, it's our money?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I say, not all councils are bad, and we do have the odd positive story where a council has has done something to save the taxpayer money, and we fully applaud that. Unfortunately, as you say, we find too many examples of waste. We actually have a section in our weekly email we send out our supporters called the War on Waste, and we are never short of material for council-related stories. In terms of holding them account, I think, as you say, other than at the ballot box, we need to get people more involved in the process. The TPA is a team of about 13 people, but we rely on our supporters all over the country to submit freedom of information requests, to have a look through council data, to find the things that maybe we don't see. And you take these things to the press. The local press, I think, is very underrated in this country. You call out these councillors. They don't want bad press. They only want good press because they do want to get elected. But we've got to have more transparency. We've got to call out this wasteful spending.
Deceitful spending. I had a huge gripe. I should have sent it to you actually. It was only a couple of weeks ago, but I had a huge gripe. I mean, Lambeth Council get it in the neck a lot from me on this programme because sadly for them, I live in Lambeth. Sorry, Lambeth, but I will always keep banging on your door. But one of the most frustrating stories I've ever covered in my career, and I'm so lucky to be in a position where I can actually hold these people to account, like yourself. But I myself in my borough had problems during lockdown renewing my residence parking permit. We've all had those issues when you go online, it doesn't work properly. And the website was down. And the website was down in April, right? And I remember tweeting them in April to say, look, the website's down, what's happening? I remember friends of mine in Lambeth telling, and I saw video of them discussing it with the traffic wardens, that look, the website's down, you can't issue tickets to residents who can't renew their own permits. They did issue me a parking ticket. They refused to cancel the parking ticket, still stating it was my responsibility, even though I'd sent proof that their website was down to renew permits. And after a freedom of information request, Lambeth Council issued 5,000 parking tickets to residents who couldn't, during the period that their website was down for renewals, 5,000 specifically to drivers who had outdated permits. Now, They knew that the website was down. I'd sent them a tweet to tell them the website was down, and even within that freedom of information request, they still claimed they didn't know, even though I and countless others told them. And unfortunately, stories like that, they don't just make us think that they're wasteful, it makes us think that they're deceitful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a ludicrous example. You say that there was a problem they could have solved basically, and they didn't, and then they had the nerve to find people. I mean, ultimately, this can all end in disaster for councils because if what you said had happened with a private company, they'd probably go out of business. But the councils don't have that sort of weight hanging over them because ultimately they have a guaranteed source of income from us. I mean, you only have to look at the Northamptonshires of the world that basically went bust and had to have the government come in and rescue them to see what happens if they don't get a grip on these issues. And I think I saw a story the other day that Croydon Council is now in tremendous trouble. I saw another story about Norfolk just before we came on air. They're £130 million budget shortfall, but they want to spend £3 million refurbing their headquarters. They clearly haven't got their priorities right. Just going back to what you were saying about the fines. I mean, councils now seemingly they're trying to raise more revenue by implementing as many fines as they can. I think your producer sent me some examples of fining a little girl for setting up a lemonade stand, which was £150 fine or something ridiculous like that. They're doing these things rather than focusing on how can we eradicate wasteful spending and how can we deliver the best frontline services possible for our residents. They're going about it in completely the wrong way.
Well, my freedom of information also revealed that during the actual official lockdown period, Lambeth got over £600,000 in parking fines, just in general ones. So those people who were going out in their cars, trying to socially distance and park in a way to do so, were fined during a global pandemic. And it's really difficult not to have a negative view of everything they do when you hear of councils acting in the way you just heard with £150 fine for a little girl selling lemonade, or fining people during a global pandemic. And it's really, really difficult to have anything other than, as I said, a really negative view, especially when they're so vociferous when it comes to fining wrongdoing. However, when a climate campaign decides to take over an entire section of a park, that's apparently okay.
It's interesting what you say about lockdown, actually, because, of course, during lockdown, we saw a massive reduction in council services. I think there was, talks of bin collections might be suspended, that sort of thing. But also, the local tips, a lot of the local tips shut down for many weeks. But did we see a reduction in our council tax? No, not at all. We were all asked to continue paying. And I know there was support for people who maybe were struggling to make ends meet. But, council staff didn't get furloughed or anything like that. I have it on good authority from a cabinet member of a council that the planning departments were just sitting around doing nothing because obviously the housing market ground to a halt and there was no planning applications going in. So
and I guarantee you their pensions won't have been affected. I guarantee you that much as well, I'm sure. Absolute nightmare. Listen, really good to talk to you. Harry Fone, Grassroots Campaign Manager at the Taxpayers Alliance. What do you make of all of that? And come on, get it off your chest as well. A little bit of counselling for you, for your local council tonight. Tell me the gripes you have and the things that make you tear out your hair. All of that and more here on Talk Radio. Online.